Look at this man, sitting there in that ugly shirt. Yes, you! That stuff is garbage! It's no good! So let's change that. That's a lot better! Now he's wearing the new, fresh Dr.Wily merch that you can get as well for only $21.99. Get any of the new Wily character designs on a shirt, hoodie, mug, poster, pillow, anything really. And that's not all. You can also get the Dr.Wily logo on a t-shirt or anything else. So go check it out now by clicking the link in the upper right corner, clicking the link in the description, or by checking out the merch shelf below the video. Now, The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild introduced a lot of new elements to the game that were never really seen before. Think of stuff like the runes, which played a big role in puzzles, or the physics-based engine that played aspects in every part of the game. However, there was one other thing that was also seen in this weird title. The champion powers that you got from beating the Divine Beast dungeons seen around the world. And the big question of today is, what will actually replace this mechanic? Or what will change about them in Breath of the Wild 2? They probably won't remain the same after all. So today we will take a look at what could happen. So let's dive right in. Now in the first game you get these powers one by one, and all of them make you stronger or better in some way. In general, making Link incredibly versatile and powerful. There were a total of 4 that you could get in the game, and each one of them was based on the respective champion powers. But what are they exactly? Well, let's have a quick look at them. First up, Rivali's Gale, which you get after defeating Windblight Ganon and completing the Divine Beast Meadow. If you use the ability, it launches Link high up into the sky and creates an updraft that can be used until it disappears, which is obviously handy when scaling any big obstacles. The next one is the Rook's Protection, which you get after defeating Fireblight Ganon and completing the Divine Beast Darunia. This one does something completely different. It creates a red crystal barrier around you when used, which makes sure that you're protected from all attacks and damage while it's up, as well as deflecting certain attacks back, such as Guardian Beams. Obviously, this is handy for survivability. Now another one we got to mess around with is Mipha's Grace, which you get after defeating Waterblight Ganon and clearing the Divine Beast Varuta. It protects you from death and recovers your health. Similar in a way to the fairies seen in Breath of the Wild and a bunch of other Zelda games. But this power-up will also give you 5 extra hearts. Again, another ability that's handy for survivability. And the last one you get is our Bossas Fury, which you get after defeating Thunderblight Ganon and completing the Divine Beast Vana Boris. This is one of the strongest powers in the game, allowing it to send off a massive radius of electrical damage to everything in the vicinity, which is great for getting rid of a lot of enemies. And all of them have a limited amount of uses before they need to be recharged. That way they aren't completely overpowered. Alright, now that we basically know what we're working with, we can start to take a look at them one by one, because let's assume for now that they will return. However, they most likely won't be the same anymore. They will be different. But in what way? Well, a good example of this from another set of games which will give us an idea is the iconic duo of Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask. First you had Ocarina of Time. In this game you went from a kid to an adult, using this to collect everything you needed in order to beat Ganondorf in the future. Now the other game, Majora's Mask, takes place right after it, and uses a lot of things as well as assets from it. So it was a similar situation to what we have here with Breath of the Wild 1 and 2. Now in the end, in both of those older games, time travel was a big mechanic. However, in Majora's Mask, it was a 3-day loop that you had to work with, because otherwise the world would be destroyed by a gigantic moon. So while the mechanic did make a return, things kind of changed. And we think this might happen in the next Zelda game as well. Now the option we want to look at is Modularity. We see that Link obtains some strange glow, and this might allow him to use his old powers in completely new ways. But what kind of ways? Well, let's take a look at it all to see what Nintendo could do with them in order to make the next game a bit more interesting. Let's start with Rivali's Gale. When it comes to this one, we have one big idea that could really be fun to use and also great in underground scenarios. Instead of just allowing you to get high up into the air, which is great in the open world of the first Breath of the Wild game, you can decide the direction of the wind you create. Now to give you an idea why this is even useful at all, let's pick an example where you could use it. You're exploring an underground section of the game and come across a huge gap, and as far as you can see, there's no way of getting past it. Well, in a situation like this, you can use Rivali's Gale to jump over it. You aren't limited to just upward momentum after all. This would make the power way more useful in almost every situation you can imagine, which is perfect for a game where you aren't just wandering around outside, which seems to be the case in Breath of the Wild 2 since there's a big focus on caves in the trailer we saw. Now, we like this idea a lot and Nintendo could totally pull this off in the game, with almost no effort on their end, but it would still make it very different from the first version of it because of all the new options you have with it now. However, we also came up with another idea of what they could do with this ability, and it was inspired by a power seen in the MMO game World of Warcraft. Now in this game you can use an ability called Wind Fury, which gives you a chance to deal a quick extra hit using magical wind to guide your weapon. Now this concept could also work in a game like Zelda, using the wind from Rivali's Gale to increase your attack speed to an extent. This would also make it useful in combat, aside from launching yourself up into the air to shoot arrows, of course. Now the chance of it being used like this is not very likely, but being able to decide the direction of the wind is certainly possible. Now let's move on to the next one in line, the Rook's Protection. What could you do with this one? Well, it's a shield, so why not allow players to use it in more interesting ways? For example, making them immune to certain effects for a limited amount of time. Alright, let's say you encounter a river of lava that you need to cross. Here you could surround yourself with this shield, allowing you to go straight through it. Now, it won't protect you from the effects of the lava forever, but at least for a short amount of time to get past it. This would 100% be fitting with the ability. It was given to you by a Goron, who are usually fireproof after all, but Nintendo also has another option when it comes to this one, being able to place the shield in a location you choose for a limited amount of time. We got this idea when thinking about another game franchise once again, this time the sci-fi Halo games. Here you can use an item called the Drop Shield, which creates a blue-tinted spherical protective energy shield. If you stand inside of it, any attacks from the outside will be blocked until it takes too much damage. Then it will disappear. Now in Breath of the Wild, the shield you got already looks very similar to what players got in the Halo games. So why not make it a thing in the Zelda games as well? It will be incredibly useful in combat situations where you are surrounded. For example, you're being attacked by a group of bokoblins who are on horseback shooting with bows at you. Here, casting this bubble around you to protect you from dozens upon dozens of arrows would be a lifesaver, and would also allow you to do more crazy things with it. However, there's another ability that could also help in a situation like this if it's slightly different than before. Mipha's Grace. Sure, being revived is great, however you might not be alone in the second Breath of the Wild game, since Zelda seems to be with you, so why not allow the players to use their powers to heal others, which would be great to have when you go through the game, or just certain portions of it with the princess. Besides that, we don't actually really have any other ideas of what you could do with this power, without, of course, changing it in major ways. So if you have any ideas for Mipha's Grace, let us know in the comments. But what about our very last one, or Bossas Fury? What can you do with that power-up now that the game's setting is so different? Well, if the underground portions really become a thing in the game, then this ability will be in trouble since the lightning strikes down from the skies. So it would have to change. And it could actually do something really cool now that Link has the glowing power in his arm. Maybe Link is able to cast it like a spell from an RPG game. Some sort of lightning bolt that shoots from his hand, damaging and stunning a whole group of enemies. This would be incredibly useful in both an enclosed area as well as somewhere outside in the world itself. But you could also do something else with it, empowering things that Link already uses like melee and ranged weapons. Just imagine being able to enchant your weapon with electricity, allowing you to do a couple of hits or shoot arrows using your Bossas Fury to power it up. That would be incredibly useful. And of course it's more powerful than a normal electric weapon. However, while all these new options for the abilities sound cool, we aren't sure if they will even return. We saw the champions pass over to the afterlife at the end of the first game after all, so maybe Link lost their special abilities thanks to this. If that's the case, then we don't really know what could replace it, mostly because it depends on the new game mechanics they will introduce. For example, they could add an ability where Link is able to extend his arm using that blue energy, so he can use it as a hook shot or some sort of grapple hook. But again, this depends on what Nintendo does. However, there's also another thing that will probably change a lot, and is very likely to return just because they put so much time into it. The runes from the Sheikah Slate, and the new glowing hand will likely play a role in this. But that's a question for another day. We aren't here to answer it after all. However, if you would like to see more videos talking about what we could see in Breath of the Wild 2, then be sure to let me know in the comments down below.